All right. So the purpose of this video is to share with you some of the differences in what you're going to actually see when you do a GL detail migration versus a subledger migration. And what we'll look at is how the information shows up in the GL in Intacct versus the subledger in Intacct. So we'll start here with a QuickBooks system, and we're going to actually take a few different reports and look at some transactions. First, we're going to look at a bill. So let's look at the vendor balance detail, and we're going to focus in on this guy. We're looking at the vendor is Great Statewide Bank, and it's bill number 13 that happened on the 16th of September, 2025. Let's take a look in on that bill. So you see here in QuickBooks, this is a bill. Vendor is Great Statewide Bank, has two lines on that bill, one for 626.61 with a class of overhead, and the second one is 7251 with a class of overhead. So this bill has a reference number of 13, an amount due of $699.12, and a due date that's 10 days in the future. So let's take a look. If we were going to make this into a journal entry, this would no longer be a bill in Intacct, but what we would do is contextualize it so that it shows up in reports and behaves like a bill in Sage Intacct. Let's take a look at what that actually looks like. So in Larry Landscape 1, which is our general ledger detail migration, we're going to go find that bill. So we come to, in this case, we would put this transaction is living in a historical journal. And what we would do is give you the ability to search for it. There are a couple of different ways to find it. You could run a general ledger detail report. You could go straight into the journal where the history is kept. In this case, what we're going to do is just search for bill number 13. Bill number 13, which is right here. So you see bill 13, transaction 368. And if we want to just cross-reference that really quickly, go back to the report that we were looking at, the vendor balance detail, we would see that bill number 13 was transaction ID number 368. So what we try to do is contextualize that for you so you can cross-reference that and trace it right back to QuickBooks if you had to. So when we take a look at the transaction, you see that it has been transformed. So it's bill number 13, transaction 368 from Larry's Landscape, which is our QuickBooks sample file that we were just looking at. And you see it has three lines. It has an offset line, which is your accounts payable account, and it has two lines representing the same two transactions amounts that you saw on the bill. And if we look at the further details, you'll see that the entire transaction is dimensionalized with the same Great Statewide vendor ID. This means that you could run a general ledger detail report and cross-reference the vendor ID and pull up every transaction that happened in the system with this vendor ID associated. So let's quickly go and look at the same for an invoice. So let's show you an invoice associated with a customer in this system. So we're going to be looking at invoice number 101 or transaction 504. So if we take a quick look there, you see that invoice belongs to Christina Andres. She has two lines. So we have trimming for $70 and we have pest control for $38.50 for a total invoice amount of $108.50. Let's go look at what that becomes in the general ledger detail migration for Intacct. So if we come back out and we go looking for that particular journal entry, we know that it was invoice number 101. So effectively, we're looking for invoice 101, transaction 504. If you remember, we saw that from QuickBooks. Let's go ahead and take a look in on what that looks like. So you'll see there's an offset amount of $108.50 and three lines associated with the original invoice of $70, $38.50, and in this case, no dollars for sales tax because that's how Intacct was configured to report all three lines but there was no sales tax in this case. So we have a balanced transaction that goes in as a general ledger detail journal entry. But if you notice, we have here that the Christina Andres is the customer, and we have a project ID that we mapped when we were doing our testing that was assigned to this one, just to show you that we can grab and place project information from transactions on this as well. So you'll see here, the transaction is completely contextualized and rebuilt, but as a journal entry. And that's important here. Let's look at the same transactions now, the same bill number 13, if we were on the subledger. So now we're going to do the exact same migration, but this time this scope is going to be on the subledger. So we go to the bill list in the same Larry landscape, and we're going to look for bill number 13. So bill number 13, Great Statewide Bank, taking place on 9/16/2023 for $699.12. Now on the subledger, I have been able to pay this bill, and so we can go in and take a look at how the bill plays out. 2 lines on the bill, 626.61 and 72.51 for the 2 different GL accounts. And this is a vendor ready to go create statement charges, whatever you wanted to do, because it's in the AP module. So you could pull an AP ledger report or anything that you wanted on the subledger to reflect everything that was happening here. You also see that we have been able to associate this payment that happened on this day with the bill. And so you see that green check mark says that it is paid off. And as a result, you have the full subledger record rebuilt and linked in Intacct. Let's go ahead and quickly look at the accounts receivable invoice. The same one that we got was invoice number 504. Invoice was 504. Let's see what comes up. All right, let's find this a different way. So we're going to look for Christina Andres. All right. And it was 101. It was 101. It was invoice 101. I made a mistake. So the invoice was actually 101. The transaction was 504. So we take a look at invoice 101, and we see here that it is a rebuilt invoice. We have 3 lines, the initial $70 line, we have a $38.50 line and zeros. Now, if you remember in the original QuickBooks migration, there were quantities associated. If we were going to rebuild those quantities, we would have to do that at the level of order entry and build those as order entry transactions, which we can do, and then link the invoice to the payment that would be coming in, but that would be an upcharge. So this is what it looks like on the subledger as a rebuilt invoice. And if we wanted to take a look at the payment, we absolutely could. In the case here, we see this is transaction EFT number 3006, which was on 11/17/2025. So if we were to just come over to posted payments and look for EFT and the 1225 was Andres, right? So Andres, it was EFT 11/17/2025 was a payment for $108.50. And this is the one that it was associated with. So we are able to post and link the payments indubitably. So there is no doubt here that this payment went to pay off this particular invoice. So that's some of the power that makes up the difference between the general ledger detail migration scope and the subledger migration scope. And I appreciate your consideration. Thank you and have a great day.